Hello and welcome back to the Action Network UFC betting preview presented by DraftKings. I'm your host, Sean Zerillo, joined again by Billy Ward to look at the UFC 324 card, give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to instantly tell us some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip link both in the podcast and the video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. 13 fight card from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, prelims at 5 p.m. Main card at 9 p.m. as we enter the post pay-per-view era in UFC. Fights will be on Paramount Plus. Before we get into it, though, Billy, first off, welcome back to the show. Hair looks phenomenal, beard looks great, but more importantly, you've upgraded your jiu-jitsu abilities, or at least upgraded your belt and how you present your jiu-jitsu abilities since we've last talked. So now up at brown belt. Congratulations on that. How long did it take you to get from purple to brown? And then what is the expected timeline that it takes to get from brown to black?
Yeah, I've had a different journey through jiu-jitsu than most people will, just because had been training for 10 years plus, just in MMA and no gi. So I came in, got the blue and purple fairly quickly, like didn't spend the usual time, and then spent about 2.5 years at purple belt. They say in theory brown belt is supposed to be the quickest. The IBJJF says you only have to be a brown belt for 1 year, where the lower belts are longer than that. I don't know that most people get through Brown in a year, but at least at our school, you win a bunch of competitions at Brown that kind of bump you up a little bit faster. And a lot of local stuff, Brown and black belts are just thrown together anyway, so there's not as appreciable of a difference. But yeah, it feels nice to be up there with the big boys. Hopefully, I can get similarly aged matchups because a 36-year-old brown belt compared to a 24-year-old purple belt, I'd give the advantage to the 24-year-old in most cases among non-professional athletes. It's not like these guys in the UFC, that's just what they do. Some of these 20-something kids are flying through the belts and in a lot better physical shape than the gentlemen of a certain age, brown and black belts like you. I mean, not that you train, but guys our age, I should say. So, yeah, it was fun. I was able to add the purple belt to the list. I've been doing jiu-jitsu proper for about 4 years. That's obviously really fast to get to that belt level, but I had trained for 10 plus years, almost exclusively no-gi before that, which throws a little bit of a curveball.
Well, it's really great, man, and congrats to you. And I'm sure
Thank
we
you.
will see some jiu-jitsu this weekend in the main event between Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje. And that's my biggest issue with Gaethje's game is his jiu-jitsu game on bottom. His takedown defense is fine, around 70% for his career. But once you're able to get Justin Gaethje onto the mat, he does seem to have holes. He gives up his back, gives up submissions. I don't think this fight stylistically, not saying in terms of the skill set of each fighter, but stylistically, the binary nature of it, kind of reminiscent for me as the Charles Oliveira Justin Gaethje fight, and I think it could end in a similar matter where it's just very quick, very aggressive in terms of the exchanges in the pocket. Gaethje should have the better boxing. We've seen Paddy struggle against lead hooks in his fight against Jared Gordon. He is unbeaten in the UFC. There's arguments that he lost that fight, but can only beat the guys that they put in front of you. Has had a weaker strength of schedule than Justin Gaethje. By the numbers, Paddy has actually been the more efficient striker at distance across their respective careers, outlanding opponents by 2.2 strikes. Gaethje getting outlanded by a full strike. But when you factor in the relative strength of competition, I don't think that number necessarily holds
Right.
water. I don't expect them to strike for 25 minutes, and Paddy is the more efficient striker of the pair. Justin carries more power, but he's also older, 6 years older, 37 years old now. Also had that brutal knockout loss to Max Holloway, two back, came back with a win over Rafael Fiziev. Actually pretty good in that fight, but do have to be concerned about his durability in the latter stages of his career. Paddy, the younger, faster, more aggressive athlete. I do think he's going to land takedowns early here, and I think he's going to potentially finish the fight with relative ease early, even after one takedown. If not, I do see this one potentially getting finished within the first 15 minutes of the fight. And I do like the under 2.5 at even money. The under 3.5 is minus 175, and the fight to end inside the distance is minus 290. I make that prop about minus 350. I also make Paddy's submission prop about plus 125. You can get that as high as plus 150. Billy, you're going a little bit more simplified, though. You're just going to take Paddy to win inside the distance at minus 120. Curious if you're interested in taking like a Paddy in under 2.5 or a Paddy in under 3.5. What kind of finish equity do you see him having late? Just because in his previous 5 round fights, which did take place 2016 to 2018 in Cage Warriors, but his cardio didn't necessarily hold up in the later rounds. And that is an argument I've seen for this weekend. People potentially betting Gaethje live after round two, after round three, with the expectation that he may have the cardio advantage down the stretch here. So, what are your thoughts on Paddy potentially finishing this fight earlier as opposed to later, and whether he can sustain his style for 25 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, before I jump into specific numbers, love the Charles Oliveira comp that you threw out there. I've said somewhere a couple fights ago, I don't know if it was Twitter or the Action Discord, something like that, that Paddy Pimblett was kind of a poor man's Charles Oliveira, and people really did not like that, which I understand. Charles Oliveira is a legend. We all, to various extents, have enjoyed ragging on Paddy Pimblett for his style and stuff, but like Charles Oliveira holds his head up and gets hit and then tries to deal with you on the ground if you follow him. Just like Paddy, they both elite level jujitsu, solid but questionable takedowns. Like it's actually not that different. What is different is Paddy is huge, where Charles Oliveira is a former 45er, didn't look like he ever cut that much weight to 55. And I think Pimblett is going to look considerably bigger even than Gaethje, who's big for the weight class, which makes a big difference in terms of power and takedown ability. Shaziv just took Gaethje down in their fight, and that's like a kickboxer who we didn't even think knew how to shoot a double leg until that fight. So that I think is the biggest reason for me is just that size and strength makes wrestling a lot easier than it would be for someone like Charles Oliveira, who still got Gaethje to the ground, albeit by his classic Charles Oliveira, I'm gonna let you hit me, and if you follow me down, then you get submitted game. But that's a route for Paddy too, right? Like he gets hit, Gaethje might get overexcited, jump in. You're 100% right that the finish equity in any fight is going to be front loaded, but especially something like this, especially when you're relying on submissions since they get slipperier and harder to get. Although, he got Chandler later in that fight and was able to keep that up well into the third round, which crucially for me when I was thinking about it was past the 2.5 round point. So if you wanted to throw in under 3.5 or, fight doesn't start the fourth round, something like that, that would make sense, but you're not getting that much of a price adjustment there. So rather than overthink it and try to get super specific, I'm just going with Pimblett inside the distance. I can see the case for what you're saying. It does make more sense. We'd have to go back and look at historical finish rates by round and compare that to the odds to see if there's really an edge there. And truthfully, I don't put too much time into the main events knowing how thoroughly you're going to cover them. So that's not that's not where I'm going to spend my time trying to figure out the exact math because I know you've got an angle on it that usually also makes a lot of sense.
One stat I didn't cite here that I think speaks to the relative stylistic nature of either fighter. Gaethje has spent 94% of his career fight time at striking distance. Paddy has only spent 44% of his cage time at striking distance. So Paddy clearly trying to grapple. Justin clearly trying to keep this one on the feet and box
That
Paddy up. Go ahead.
say before we move on, that actually really plays into the cardio dynamics too. I think if this fight is on the feet, Gaethje's more comfortable there,
Mhm.
despite being a college wrestler, but that's neither here nor there. He's going to get less tired in striking exchanges, and Paddy's going to get less tired when they're on the ground. So, like, that's a big thing. If you are live betting this, you might say, oh, Gaethje's going to pull it through. If he's been forced to grapple for 7 or 8 of the first 15 minutes, he might be the more tired fighter. If it's mostly on the feet, he probably won't be.
Yeah, it's even the Charles fight. Charles was hitting him in the body a lot, which you could see clearly winded Justin early. But I think
Mhm.
the combination of the body shots and then also the takedowns getting up, definitely like exhausted him pretty quickly. So yeah, I think Justin could strike all day, but that's an excellent point. If you force him to grapple, force him to do other things, hit him in the body, it may even out the cardio and certainly want the younger athlete. And I think Patty is probably taking some supplements to maybe level up his physical abilities in the later rounds as well. He looks like an absolute tank. Physically, they had a face off the other day, which UFC needs to be real careful about letting fighters face off unsupervised because that is going to go very poorly at some point. But he did look absolutely yoked when they were standing next to one another. So I think Patty's the side this weekend, considering the public support for Gaethje, picking him around 40% of the time compared to implied odds closer to 30%. My model on balance does like Pimblett a little bit more, just not in terms of a money line wager, probably submission prop. And I think I prefer the finish props for the fight in a binary fight in general. Let's move on to our fight of the night between Sean O'Malley and Song Yadong. This was supposed to be Kayla Harrison against Amanda
Yeah.
Nunes. Kayla Harrison ended up getting injured and pulling out of her fight. Um, so now O'Malley against Song will be a 3 round fight, even though it did get moved up on the card. We are on opposite sides of this matchup. You will have a breakdown up for this one on actionnetwork.com. You like O'Malley around minus 200. I like Song around plus 175. I'm curious in your breakdown, Billy, what your thoughts are on Song plus 3.5 at minus 150 if you think he's going to take one of the rounds in this fight. But otherwise, I'm curious to hear your breakdown and how you landed on Sugar Sean.
Yeah, what really pushed me over the top is I went back and watched that Petr Yan fight that we've all complained about being a bad decision in favor of O'Malley.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say it because I'm actually not a Sean O'Malley fan, but watching it back, I don't think it was a bad decision, or I don't think it was a terrible decision. It was one of those where I don't think either guy has a right to be mad. And then, using some Bayesian logic here, we see how good Petr Yan is. Like he's beat Merab handily, great striker. And O'Malley hung in there with him and won many of the striking exchanges using his length and his range, all of which he can also do to Song Yudong. Right? He's got that height and reach on him. He can keep the distance. He manages distance extremely well. And my strongest belief here is that O'Malley just throws so many more things. Like he throws about two more significant strikes per minute than Yudong, that he's going to get a lot of judges leans his way just on pure volume and pure optics. With all that said, I really like the plus 3.5 coming back on Yudong. That makes a lot of sense too. He has more power. I guess that's not totally debatable because O'Malley can put people down too. I think Yudong is going to throw harder or appear to be throwing harder, where O'Malley's a little bit smoother. Sometimes that can sway the judges, especially if they land clean, or if they even look like they land clean, because O'Malley does a really good job of he gets hit more than you'd like, but none of them are super square and like damaging while on the feet. And then the other point is he's never really lost to a guy in a striking match, right? Like when O'Malley loses, it's primarily due to the grappling. Not something that Song Yudong does a ton of, about half a takedown per 15 minutes. Maybe he mixes one in there, which is why he steals around. That actually would make a lot of sense towards the plus 3.5. But I don't think he's able to consistently do it and keep him down, especially in the larger pay-per-view cage. And then last point, O'Malley might be the like fans' favorite fighter, with the possible exception of Derek Lewis on this card. So we talk about fans influencing the judges and stuff. O'Malley's going to get huge reactions every time he lands a strike. Yudong is going to be crickets when he's doing well, which can influence the judges. And I think enough to the where I'm comfortable on O'Malley to cover his money line at minus 200.
I actually we're gonna see Song wrestle a bunch here.
He should.
I think he's going to grapple pretty proactively. That is why I like him in the fight. I have him
Yeah.
around 40% plus 150 implied. Now that it's out around plus 175, I really like it. I actually may prefer him live. I just don't want to miss out on the opportunity that he grapples from the outset. I'd prefer him in a 5 round fight as opposed to a 3 round fight here as well. I'm curious if your analysis would change for a 5 round fight as opposed to a 3 round fight because I do think like Petr Yan, he has a bit of that slow starter disease where he likes to build his way into the fight. O'Malley is fine from round one, typically. I think he won round one against Merab potentially the first time.
Yeah.
But O'Malley's, fine from the go. Yadong is a bit more measured, but I do think he's going to potentially look to grapple here. He landed 2 takedowns, held Chris Gutierrez down for 11 minutes. Obviously, didn't have the opportunity to wrestle in his last fight against Henry Cejudo, but I thought he looked phenomenal in that fight. And apparently in training camp, and he trains at Team Alpha Male, which is a wrestling focused
Mhm.
camp, apparently he's just been drilling grappling for the entire training camp. So I do think O'Malley's takedown defense here is going to get tested. And frankly, I thought in his last fight against Merab, it looked like he had regressed relative to the first fight. Not only or not just physically regression, but like mentally. He just looked like he didn't want to be there. And I do think there's a potential trajectories thing here where O'Malley's won the belt, had his rematch, potentially on the way down. I know he's only 31 years old, but Song is still on the ascension. And I do think there's a potential attitude and motivation thing in terms of winning the belt, accomplishing your goals. Now you're on potentially the downslope of your career. I'm not saying he is. I just think there's a potential that Song is still on the way up. O'Malley maybe peaked and is on the way down. But I really didn't like his second effort against Merab in that last fight. And I do think Song, having implemented the grappling previously against the kickboxers, controlled 60% of his grappling exchanges. O'Malley's controlled just 6%. The grappling upside is there. It's just a matter of whether he pursues it. But to the point about the first bet I mentioned, Billy, the plus 3.5 at minus 150 on Song seems like a pretty nice price on him to win at least one round without getting finished. I would probably give him more finishing upside than I would for Sean. And I do think minus 150 as opposed to, I would make that closer to minus 200 on Song to win a round without getting finished. Who do you give more finishing upside here, Billy?
I think it's pretty close because
Yeah.
we have seen O'Malley put it away. To your point about the 5 round fight, I think it's very similar to Gaethje Pimblett, where if there's a lot of grappling, O'Malley's going to look terrible late in
Mm,
the fight, and if it's mostly striking, he's going to look better. He
yep.
uses so little energy striking; it's actually really impressive. Like I'm not a huge fan of his skill set generally, but he's so smooth and able to generate power without loading up on stuff. That is really significant, not something a lot of guys can do. To your point about the last fight with Merab, I agree with you. He looked worse and he looked like he didn't want to be there. I wouldn't want to be there fighting Marab again. Like you have no chance. Like I'll be at the gym sometimes and there's a guy I know is just gonna work me, right? Like some 26-year-old bigger than me black belt. I'm just like, I don't want to do this, man. I'm not gonna try that hard. And more importantly, from something I often cite, that was the first fight back after a pretty extended layoff due to injury for O'Malley. He'd had some surgeries and stuff. I am always trying to bet guys on the second fight following their injury, right? They've had a full camp where they weren't worried about the neck, hand, knee, whatever it is at the time. It's not super applicable here because we're not getting like a great price discount on O'Malley. I think that's not what the market is seeing here, but it is relevant because a lot of times guys look bad that first fight back. The camp that they had was more about managing the injury and rehab than it was about really working skills. And then when you add in the fact that it was a rematch against a guy who you probably in your heart of hearts knew you had no real shot against, and I'm willing to look past that one. If he comes out and looks bad again, I'm with you on the like that was the peak of Sean O'Malley. We'll never see it again. But Marab, the rules don't apply when you're fighting Marab. I think is the one sentence summary of that.
Very reasonable. Going to move on to our favorite underdog section. We'll start with the fight on the prelims and then work our way back to the main card because that's going to bleed into our prop section, of which I have a number of bets to give out in the prop section for this week. We're going to cover all 13 fights naturally throughout the remainder of the pod. Nikita Krylov against Modestas Bukauskas at light heavyweight. Krylov 11-9 in the UFC, but he's 0-2 since coming back from a layoff with two round one knockout losses. Bukauskas 7-1 in his second UFC stint after an initial 0-3 run. In, but by the numbers digging deeper into this fight, Krylov actually has the better striking stats, outlanding opponents by more than 2.5 strikes per minute. Bukauskas getting outlanded by a full strike per minute. Has the better control rate in the grappling, close to 60% of his grappling time, sub 50% for Bukauskas in terms of controlling grappling positions. And then also fight time spent grappling, 66% for Krylov, 23% for Bukauskas. So presuming Krylov is willing to get back to the grappling here, something which he has not done in his past two fights, I do like him at underdog odds. The market likes him as well. He's crashed down from about plus 160 around plus 115. I actually make him a minus 106 favorite in this fight. I also, though, I think his decision prop and the totals are very off as well. He's been finished very quickly in his past couple of fights. Um, going back, he has a number of competitive decisions or fights where he dragged guys like Johnny Walker all 15 minutes and won a decision. He's about plus 850, plus 900 to win by decision. I make that prop closer to plus 550. And then the distance prop is around 4-1. I make that closer to plus 330, where you could bet the over 1.5 at plus money. That said, though, I don't think those necessarily correlate. I think you could have Krylov with quick finish. I think Bukauskas can drag him out to a decision, and you can end up pushing. Bukauskas finishing him early is absolutely a possibility, but I think that is more than weighted into the line at this point after his last two performances. So Krylov at plus money down to about plus 105, and then maybe the over or Krylov to win by decision. Billy, Krylov against Bukauskas. Any bets for you here?
I'm leaning towards Bukauskas. I just edited John LaFranca podcast occasional guest pick of Bukauskas. The one thing that I noticed, he didn't totally touch on this. Krylov has 44% striking defense historically in the UFC. And for a long time, he kind of did like the Charles Oliveira, Paddy Pimblett, whatever you want to call it, of like the striking defense is the chin, and we're just going to hope that holds up. And if that's gone, you can't do much about that. And it hasn't been that long since we've seen him. I don't think he suddenly became Anderson Silva with his ability to avoid shots. So if he gets clipped and then can't just count on the chin, it's going to be rough for him. With that said, he fought a lot heavier hitters in his last couple fights than he's facing in Bukauskas, who's got a little bit of that point fighter, karate, taekwondo, whatever style to him. So this is actually a really intriguing gambling fight. I think. I think it does correlate pretty heavily with a longer fight probably benefits Krylov.
Hmm.
In a shorter fight benefits Bukauskas, not because he's a massive finisher, but because his best path to winning is Krylov having his chin just completely gone, and we would find that out sooner rather than later since Krylov doesn't defend strikes very well.
See if Waldo Cortez Acosta's chin can hold up against Derek Lewis on the main card. Waldo's 7 years younger, Lewis 41 years old. Waldo though was kind of knocked out by Ante Delia. I mean, he also ate several shots, undefended shots up against the cage, and those never put him down. So like, you could both take
Yeah.
away something for him getting hurt, but then give him credit for not actually going down from those clean shots. Now Waldo, the more efficient striker, typically more of a point fighter, has seemed a little bit more aggressive in his recent bouts, outlanding opponents by 1.7 strikes per minute. Lewis, as we know, searching for that power shot, but typically getting outlanded by a strike per minute against his opponents. Derek is 20-10. He spent half of his fight time either in clinch or ground positions. You would not have expected that just looking at the numbers, but 48% of Derek Lewis's career fight time across 30 UFC fights has been spent in the clinch or on the ground. A lot of people trying to tie him up, push him up against the fence, neutralize him. We've seen him pop up from takedowns in the past. So there's a possibility Waldo, if he gets hurt, could maybe clinch him up, push him up against the fence. But by and large, I think this is a striking fight where Waldo just needs to avoid getting clipped. He's going to stay at range. He's going to try to land the jab. He's got to avoid Derek Lewis closing the distance and landing something bigger, clinching him up. And we've seen Lewis, the fight against Chris Daukaus basically clinched him up and started landing like power shots from the clinch. We've seen, some elements where Derek Lewis is willing to incorporate a trip or something like that to try to get leverage on opponents. But essentially, the one thing that concerns me here, after Waldo lost his fight, um, or I should say, after Waldo lost his fight, was it two back against Pavlovich? I think he's been just a little bit
Three,
more
I think now.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost the decision, and I think he's been a little bit more aggressive in the early minutes since. So I do lean Waldo both live and late here. If he gets hurt in round one, he may survive it with the chin and end up rallying late. I don't think you can count on a live bet, but Waldo round two is plus 470. Waldo round three is plus 700. I'm interested in both of those wagers. I'm just concerned because of the pacing of his last two fights and the possibility that he's being a little bit more aggressive. But I think against Derek Lewis, you will probably see him a little bit more tentative and calculated again. And Derek Lewis, as he typically is, a very public side this week. 40% of public bets and picks tracking him compared to 26% his implied odds. So I think Derek Lewis a little bit overweight this week in terms of the public percentages as he typically is. Waldo late, though, my favorite way to play him. Round two, round three, 470 and 700. Billy, you're interested in taking a dog shot here. Where do you like Derek Lewis down to? And then any other props on this matchup you're interested in?
Yeah, I actually love this fight. I've talked myself into it. I did the full preview for this one. It's not up yet. I wrote like twice as many words as we normally short for shoot for and had to edit so much of it out. I'm going to start with a conspiracy theory. This will probably not mean too much to you, Sean, but I am convinced that Derek Lewis actually invented octopus guard. Anyone who does BJJ has been inundated with Craig Jones octopus guard ads because he just dropped his second instructional on that. It's the new hotness. Everyone's playing octopus guard. If you look at the Derek Lewis just get up stuff, he's doing octopus guard. He didn't call it that. He calls it just standing up because I'm bigger and stronger than you. But like somebody doing jujitsu was like, wait a minute, we could just do that too. And then Octopus Guard was born. I have zero evidence for that other than Derek Lewis has been doing this for 12 years or whatever, and no one had heard of Octopus Guard back then. So that's number one, not really too relevant here. The big thing though is we have done this a lot in the past. We've done it with Alex Pereira, we've done it with Merab Dvalishvili, where these guys fight way more than the typical UFC fighter. And then they lose and we go, yeah, of course, they fought so much. That's got to take a toll on your body. That's got to be hard. But we always say it after they lose the one. And for once, I'm trying to be ahead of that. Waldo Cortez Acosta, this will be his sixth fight in 10 months. He kind of got knocked out by Ante Delia, as you've talked about. Based on what he usually weighs in at, I think he actually cuts a little bit of weight to get down to the 265 limit. A lot of them he's coming in like right at 265. That's just a lot to put your body through. And Derek Lewis is a guy who we can never trust to be fully healthy. We can never trust to be fully motivated. He has spent 35 seconds in the cage since May of 2024. If there's ever a time Derek Lewis is going to be mostly healthy and he's in the best shape of his life before every fight. He always says that, so I'm not putting any weight. He always looks like he has almost abs like a week before the fight, and then you see him in the cage and they're gone. So like I don't know if the time between weigh-ins and the fight uh doesn't treat him too well in terms of the diet.
The
I don't know.
post weigh-in
But
pieces they got back there.
he said before his last one that he got a double cheeseburger he really liked earlier in the week and was going back to get a couple more after weigh-ins. So like that's Derek Lewis. You can't believe anything he actually says, which is also part of the problem. But to sum it all up, 35 seconds of cage time in 18 months, he's going to be fresh. 40 is not that old for a heavyweight, and he can knock out any human being on the face of the earth. With Waldo not really being a grappler, this just strikes me as one where Salsa Boy needs to win 15 minutes of this fight, and Derek Lewis needs to win about 1 second with a big right hand. And I think he can do it. And if you're going to bet on Derek Lewis, you want to do it when he's an underdog and, the risk to reward ratio is correct because you're always taking an element of risk that like his back is broken, he tore his ACL, whatever. Like there's always a risk of something going on that he's not telling you. I think this is about as healthy as we're going to see him. He's plus 260 now. His KO prop, the best I saw was plus 380. If his money line moves but not the knockout prop, just go with the knockout prop. If he comes inside of plus 250, I might go with his finish prop or something like that. The tricky thing with Derek is he can finish guys with 5 seconds left in the third round because he just kind of waits and then throws a big right hand every so often, which he can do for 15 minutes. So it's not one of those where the stoppage is heavily front loaded like we were talking about earlier.
Before we get to the remainder of our props, if you're on Twitter, we have a great new feature. If you see a bet from any of your favorite action experts or anyone on gambling Twitter, you can now tag at Playbook and tell our bot to build you a bet slip at a book of your choice. We'll build it out for you with a quick slip link that opens right up to your sports book. So keep an eye out for a new tool at Playbook on Twitter. I believe we do not have prop support yet for these, but we should have money line and total supported throughout the UFC card. Going to move on to Rose Namajunas against Natalia Silva in the women's flyweight division. Silva, 4.5 years younger. She is the faster fighter, the more efficient striker, outlanding opponents by more than 3 strikes per minute. Rose right around neutral in terms of her differential, but Rose may have a path here in terms of grappling, landing takedowns, holding top position. She's controlled 67% of her grappling positions, just 21% for Silva, but Silva does have that 92% takedown defense, should keep this fight standing, should pick apart Rose over the better part of 15 minutes. I actually like her as a parlay piece, but more so on the spread, -3.5. You can currently get -115 on Natalia Silva here. I think she wins all 3 rounds, or at least a 30-27 on one card and 29-28 on the other. And I think she covers that -3.5 line at a pick'em price. I don't really see a finish happening. You could lay the decision price on Silva, but that's also near -200. I'd much rather have the -3.5 at -115 or include her in a parlay. As I said, I make her money line about -400. Billy, Rose Namajunas, Natalia Silva, any bets for you here?
No, I didn't put a ton of time into looking at this one. It's tough because Natalia Silva does a lot of stuff that looks really good, but probably doesn't actually get you that close to finishing someone because it is those, karate or taekwondo style kicks and strikes that they've got something on them. I'm not saying she's not hitting hard, but like Rose is fairly durable. And I don't love laying the point spread when I don't think there's much of a chance to get a finish, which makes it tricky. I think you're on the right side of it. That probably would be my bet if I had to, but got enough action elsewhere.
The Autism World Championship between Arnold Allen and Gene Silva. Gene Silva diagnosed with autism before his last fight. He's also just been saying that Arnold Allen is autistic, and Allen has embraced it. And he said, he told Dana White, if you give us more money, you'll see 2 autistic dudes really going at it. So I'm expecting a violent fight between Silva and Allen, as we typically get in Gene Silva's fights. He is coming off of that brutal knockout loss to Diego Lopez as he was starting to really pick up the pace in that fight a little bit and felt like he was starting to come on and take control there, but ended up eating that spinning back elbow, got knocked out. Allen is the bigger man. He's an inch taller, has a 1 inch reach advantage. I always have found him to be a very solid and underrated fighter. He's very well rounded, throws an absolute cracking left hand. I've always liked Arnold Allen quite a bit. I love Gene Silva as well. I'm really looking forward to this fight, but ultimately, I make the finish prop about minus 125, and they're giving you minus 105. Both of these guys are durable, but I think they're going to fight in a manner and at a pace that probably forces a finish on one side of the fight or the other. I do think Gene probably has, you look at the stats, it shows that Allen has taken down more guys. I think Gene is the better grappler of the pair, or at least the better submission grappler of the pair. Perhaps Allen is the better wrestler, but I do think if this fight hits the mat, I trust Gene to actually find a submission as opposed to Allen, finishing the fight from top position. So small edge on Gene by knockout, actually. I make his knockout prop plus 150. You can get as high as plus 175, but I like the under at a pick'em price, minus 105. Again, I make that closer to minus 125. Billy, Gene Silva, Arnold Allen, any bets or thoughts for you here?
Yeah, absolutely love this fight. You put me onto the great tweet about Gene Silva being diagnosed with autism and then handing out diagnoses, which you're allowed to do. When your opponent brings his emotional support cat to the fight against you, I feel like it's not that much of a reach to to throw that out there. But I digress. I really enjoyed doing this breakdown because I forgot how much I enjoyed watching Arnold Allen fight. It had been almost 2 years since he's been in there. Um, Another one of those guys, he has better defense than Paddy Pimblett and just pure striking defense, but he also relies on his chin being solid.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed is he stands lefty, but he drops his front hand, which means his left hand, which is his rear hand, blocking right-handed shots from his opponent is where he defends well. If you go back and watch the super clips, I'm sorry, this is long-winded, but if you go back and watch the super cuts of all Gene Silva finishes, they're all right-handed strikes, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what Allen defends fairly well. And again, he hasn't fought in 18 months. For a guy that relies on eating some shots and letting your chin power you through, that layoff is probably actually a good thing. Let some of that damage heal. The other thing I really like on the Allen side is he's a good pressure fighter despite being a taller guy, which is kind of a weird like balancing act to do because you want to stay at the range that's better for you while also moving forward. Gene Silva gets picked apart when he has to go backward. It doesn't happen often, but if Arnold Allen can lead the dance, I think Gene Silva is really going to struggle while backing up. Very tricky to do that because Silva is the better fighter in tight. Like he throws all those short elbows and uppercuts that are super dangerous. We'll see who wins that. With all that said, Arnold Allen's never even been knocked down in the UFC, and his point spread is at plus money. The plus 3.5 is plus 110. Either guy could finish this one. That I think that's, fairly non-controversial to say. If it goes to a decision, can Arnold Allen steal at least one round with cage control or managing the distance? I think he can. So I like the Arnold Allen plus 3.5 at plus 110. I put in our sheet that I also like the over it goes to the decision. I'm not going to bet that unless the point spread on Allen becomes a worse line than that because one of the two moves. So, like, if you're taking the over, I think you take Arnold Allen's point spread. If it went 3 rounds, both guys had their moments. He's not just going to get dominated for 15 minutes and also survive against Gene Silva. That's just not, it's very hard to see both those things happening. So, I like Arnold Allen's point spread. It got the preview for this one, I believe, already out. Go read it. I went into the technical stuff pretty deep in there. And before we move on, 100% agree with you on your grappling analysis. Like wrestling versus, submission grappling. If Allen does any grappling, it needs to be like cage pushing, not shooting for takedowns at range and sticking your neck out there because Silva will take it.
Yeah, I can get behind that Allen point spread plus 3.5. I make his money line right around plus 200, which is, I think he's gotten up as high as plus 230. I would also monitor that line. There's a chance it continues to
Hmm.
blow out. People tie Gene Silva in a parlays and whatnot. There's other parlayable pieces on this card. I could see Gene parlays kind of juicing Allen closer to plus 250 even. So make it an even better number on that point spread by the time the fight comes around. As the money line comes up, the point spread odds tend to float up with it. So keep an eye on Allen plus 3.5. Definitely like that bet that Billy gave out. I have more notes on this fight, which is the biggest favorite on the card, Umar Nurmagomedov, than I have on any other fight, and I think it's because I'm trying to figure out why Umar is such a substantial favorite. Obviously, a great fighter, but this is just pure disrespect to Davison Figueiredo, former flyweight champion, who just upset Montel Jackson as a plus 275 underdog. And Montel Jackson, 5-inch height advantage, 7-inch reach advantage over Figgy. Umar obviously much more comparable in size to the former flyweight, but Figgy likely to get held down, taken down, held down here on bottom. He does have good jiu-jitsu abilities, but not as much from the bottom. I mean, he has a good guillotine on the way down, potentially slap a guillotine on Umar. He has good power, though it hasn't carried as much to 135 as it did from 125. But all of that said, factoring in all of the knowns, I still have a difficult time getting Figueiredo to plus 900 or whatever this is. If it got to 10 to 1, I'd probably take a small stab on Figgy, 10th of a unit, 20th of a unit. You just got to have something on there if he's going to cross 10 to 1. What I really do like here, though, is the goes the distance prop. I make that about minus 200. Possible Umar finds a submission from top position. In fact, he really needs a finish to get back into title contention. He
Yeah.
basically accidentally knocked out Handy Barcelos, otherwise 5 decisions in his last 6 fights after 3 finishes to start his UFC career. So I'm sure Umar is going to be aggressively hunting a submission because he does want to get back in the title picture at 135. I just think Figueiredo is skilled enough to survive on bottom and potentially make this competitive over the course of 15 minutes. I believe his decision prop is around 14 to 1 as well. So some interesting, huge numbers there on Figueiredo to pull the upset. I don't know if he's going to pull the upset for his second consecutive fight, but I do think he can make this one competitive. Billy Figueiredo, Nurmagomedov, what was your reaction to this line? And is there any way you're going to bet this one?
Yeah, I had the same thought that it was just way too wide, but then I also thought like I don't see how Figueiredo wins it, so I guess like
Guillotine.
is is the is the difference between plus 500 and plus 900 like does that actually really matter? You know what I mean in terms of like it matters to us and when we're betting stuff, but like if you don't think he can win, it doesn't really. If he gets guillotined, they're gonna kick him out of the family and make him change his name to Smith or something. Like you can't. These guys cannot get guillotined with their wrestling style. Yeah, he'd be excommunicated
Wherever they
immediately.
sent Ulanbekov, he gets to go there too.
Yeah, they would
Ulanbekov's
take
out.
his silly hat. They would just immediately remove that from him, and Habib and the boys would just leave and be like, "We'll see you, man. Like, good luck. You're on your own." So yeah, I don't see the guillotine coming. Guillotines are not, in fact, real. They shouldn't work. Don't get guillotined. That's all I have to say on this fight.
That's analysis from a now brown belt that guillotines are
Yeah.
something that
Not
don't
not
work.
financial or legal advice here. If you get guillotined and go to sleep, that's not my problem.
One of the other biggest favorites on the card, Ativa, somebody I used to know, Gauthier against Andre Pulaev, 185-pound fight. Gauthier, 5 years younger, though I don't know if I necessarily believe that this guy is 23 years old, but he does have a 3-inch reach advantage and an absolute crazy physique. If this guy was born in the U.S., he would be playing defensive end or defensive tackle for an NFL team, most likely. I mean, just absolutely humongous. Now, Pulaev did lose by round 1 KO regionally. He has survived in all of his other fights. It's anticipated, it's favored that Gauthier will finish him in round 1. The only thing I would really consider here, and it's probably not even something I'm going to bet, but Gauthier and the under 1.5 rounds in the same game parlay is only minus 200, which seems reasonable. Risk a half unit, get a quarter unit back. Again, I don't know if it's something I'm going to bet, considering we've seen Pulaev survive. And it's possible that Gauthier, hunts for a submission, right? In a matchup where he's a big favorite. Like, as he continues to progress in his UFC career, I believe he has 3 or 4 consecutive knockout wins. Like, you do see these guys. Mansour Abdul-Malik, his last fight, huge
Yep,
favorite, right?
just gonna say that.
Went for the submission. So I'm cautious. I would be cautious about laying minus 300 or whatever it is for Gauthier to win by knockout. It's possible there's value on his submission prop here. Puliayev is not really a grappler, so this is the kind of guy that you would do it against. Gauthier may even have the grappling edge, but probably not something I'm betting into. Just wanted to briefly break down this fight and highlight Gauthier as a guy we're going to continue to see as a very steep favorite, considering what he actually looks like when you look at him physically. He looks like a freak of an athlete. So, Billy, Gauthier against Pulev. Any bets or thoughts for you on this matchup? And what do we think Gauthier is actually walking in the cage at in terms of poundage? Is this guy hitting the cage at 210 pounds?
I totally forgot about your alternate nickname for Atiba, which I love so much. It brings me so much joy. We need to get that, send that through the ranks somehow. Someone in the UFC needs to suggest that to him. He's probably not familiar with that song or musical artist as a 23-year-old, but Cameroonian, something like that.
Nor should he be.
Yeah, right. True. Um, my like weird long shot bet that I might make on this is that the fight goes long. I was gonna bring up a different Mansour Abdul Malik fight where I believe it was Cody Brundage fight where he just seemed like he was trying to get some cage time. And you'll see guys do that. Like, I don't know if the UFC tells them ahead of time, like, hey, this is your last freebie. You know, you win this, you're gonna start fighting tougher dudes, and that's when they decide to do it. Or if it's just something that the camp decides on, for other reasons. I could see this going long for that reason. Just like, hey, man, don't kill him right away. Like, build some experience because you don't want to find out what a third round feels like when you're fighting a top 10 dude. So that's my little pet conspiracy theory in here. Yeah, I mean, 205 as a in cage weight is probably like on the minimum for him. I think he's probably at least north of 200, probably north of 205. We'll see. Since they moved weigh-ins back like effectively an additional 12 hours from when they used to do it 10, 15 years ago, the day of weigh-ins or the day of weight is got to be creeping up because guys know they can cut a little bit more weight and still recover. So it'd be interesting. Hopefully they get him a fight in California so we can find out because California still releases the fight day weights
Yeah, interested if he could
when it
continue to
comes out.
stay at 185 as opposed to having to move up eventually, which I think would obviously limit
Yeah.
his potential. If this dude can keep cutting to 185, he's going to be a serious
And-
problem.
But light
Flyweight battle,
heavyweight is terrible. Like if Beta leaves,
true.
maybe just go up and fight super slow dudes at 205, even if you are a little bit smaller. Like that's if this sport made sense where talent was evenly distributed, I'd 100% agree with you. But like 205 is so bad, I would just do it if this weight cut was taxing him.
I was going to go to a flyweight bout, but let's actually talk about Josh Hokett, who is a bit of a smaller heavyweight, fighting up against Denzel Freeman, who's coming in closer to the heavyweight limit, probably about a 30-pound gap between these two. Hokett, I believe, wrestled against Bo Nickel in college, right? He's like a little bit of
Mhm.
a smaller guy, where Denzel is a Greco-Roman all-Marine wrestler. Hokett was a all-American wrestler at Fresno State, just freestyle, but competing at slightly lower weight classes. But in terms of cage wrestling, I strongly prefer Josh Hokett, going head to head here. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to land takedowns against the guy like Freeman, who's big, who has that Greco-Roman style, and may able to just be keep this one on the feet. But pure cage wrestling, give me Josh Hokett all day. Athleticism, give me Josh Hokett all day. Josh Hokett walked on to the Fresno State football team, ended up having like a very productive career as an H-back. After walking on to a college football team, he was then an undrafted free agent to the NFL for two different teams, spent 3 years on the practice squad for the 49ers and the Cardinals. This dude is super athletic. And I'll take his athleticism, the speed all day over Denzel Freeman. I bet on Freeman in his debut against Merrick Bulio. I thought you could have cut Freeman after the fight. Absolutely terrible. Not only did he not attempt a takedown, which is his best skill, his striking just looked awful. And the pace and motivation just looked awful. I think Hokett is going to run circles around this guy. I think he's significantly faster. I like Hokett live if by some chance he gets taken down or loses the first round. But Hokett by KO plus 300, Hokett round two plus 500, and then Hokett round three plus 850. I think his speed is going to wear Denzel Freeman down, wear him out, and I think Hokett puts him away a little bit later in the fight. So give me the smaller man, but the better athlete here. Billy, do you have any thoughts on Hokett against Freeman?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this fight. I'm not saying I'm looking forward to it because Freeman can take the life out of him. First thought, absolute nightmare landing scenario for a fullback to be on the 49ers practice squad when they've had Kyle Juszczyk for so long. Like he might currently be in the NFL had he been picked up almost anywhere else. So like, kind of sucks for Hokett there, but
Should have
we get it.
armbarred check in practice or something and had broken a limb, and then he could have taken a
Right,
shot.
you have to. That's the only way they're going to call it. Teams don't carry two fullbacks, so like when Kyle Juszczyk is the other one, you are out of luck.
Oh,
Greco-Roman, as we found out, is actually kind of a terrible base for MMA
yeah.
because you have to. They don't. You're not allowed to touch the legs in Greco-Roman takedowns. So until you're at hugging range, it doesn't do anything for you. Which means the ceiling of a Greco-Roman guy is just like cage push takedowns. With all that said, that's exactly what you should be trying to do to Josh Hokett. Super explosive guy, throws really hard, blasts into takedowns. is used to, wrestling minute and a half folk style rounds, football plays that last 3 or 4 seconds. He explodes real hard. I don't know how his cardio will hold up if he's forced to like fight his back off the fence. And Denzel Freeman, for all of his faults, he can hold you against the fence for a long time, especially when he's 30 pounds bigger than you. So my bet on this is actually, assuming the line cooperates, Denzel Freeman live, even partially through the first round or after the first round. If he can just get Hokit to the fence and slow this fight down, I think he's going to really wear on the power and the explosiveness of Hokit. A Freeman win will be a stupid fight to watch. Like no one will be happy watching Freeman win because it'll be extremely boring. But if he's going to do it, I think we're going to get either maybe not even a better price. I don't need the line to get any bigger. I just need him to not die for the first 3 minutes or get stuck on his back, which he probably will. So I really like Freeman as a live piece here under, the right set of circumstances.
Let's move on to that flyweight fight that I mentioned between Alex Perez and Charles Johnson. Perez, the undisputed GOAT of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, leading against the Amabayev, Tatsuro Taira, and Muhammad Bakayev, losing all three of those fights. Also immediately submitted by both Figgy and Alexander Pantoja in fights where he should have been competitive. Those dudes just kind of ran at him and he panicked. The Figgy fight was also a short notice championship bout. That was just circumstances that were not really in his favor. And then the other loss for Alex Perez was the prime Joe Benavidez. So, very good losses, quality losses throughout his career, the Notre Dame quality losses for Alex Perez. But, now he's getting up there in age, cannot be trusted in terms of his durability at this point. Johnson's only a year younger, but he's 3 inches taller. He has a 5-inch reach advantage, and in my opinion, is the better boxer. Perez is a good striker, but Johnson is the better boxer. 66% takedown defense for his career. Perez does have some grappling upside here. 74% control rate, just 22% for Johnson. But I think Johnson's defensive wrestling and his scrambling ability has been vastly improved from when he first came into the UFC to now. And I also prefer his cardio and a higher paced fight against a guy we've seen just wear down consistently. So Johnson live, but also KO plus 575. Round 2, 750. Round 3, 10-1 on Charles Johnson against Alex Perez. Billy, any thoughts for you here?
Absolutely love the late KO props. It feels like that's what's going to happen. He's not Charles Johnson, that is not typically a guy who just murks you with one shot. Perez is a guy who has very questionable durability down the stretch. And Charles Johnson proving that somehow like the 15,000 meter run is a better base for MMA than Greco-Roman wrestling, which he continues to prove every time he steps foot in the cage and like makes these semi-dramatic late comebacks because his cardio is absurd.
First spot on the card between Ty Miller and Adam Fugit. Miller making his UFC debut here, won via decision on the Contender Series against Jimmy Drago. He's a minus 240 favorite. Fugit 2-3 in the promotion, including a legit loss on Dana White Contender Series to Michael Morales. Cannot fault him for that. He actually survived to round 3 against Morales. Wins over Josh Klingman and Kenosha, though, neither of whom had UFC success. He does have the grappling upside, but Miller is unbeaten. He's former Golden Gloves winner. I think he should run away with this fight, but I actually like him to win it later, potentially round 2 or round 3. Miller in the over 1.5 on the same game parlay is plus 105. So I'm probably going to go with that. Miller plus money to win either in the back half of round 2, round 3, or by decision. And then Miller live if he loses the first round, getting out wrestled, I think could be a good angle as well. I also make him a parlayable piece. I make him closer to minus 600. You can get as low as minus 450 at present, but I think that Miller and over 1.5 SGP might be my favorite way to play this one. Billy, any thoughts for you?
Yeah, I love your angle because he's like he builds with his striking. I was super impressed by him on the Contender Series. Another guy I'd love to see what he actually steps into the cage at because he's dude is massive. He's 6'2", 6'5.5" reach, but like not skinny. Like a lot of times we see guys like that and they're built like Corey Hill or whatever, but he's got some heft to him and also way too tall and long for the division, which is impressive. Not betting it myself. I'm gonna have a ton of Ty Miller in DFS. He's considerably cheaper than Umar and Gauthier. And while I don't think his ceiling is quite as high, it wouldn't shock me if he puts up a similar score to either of those guys. And his ownership's going to be lower because everyone is trying to find the salary to play Umar or Gauthier. So that is my angle on that. I would 100% be riding with you on your bet if I didn't have effectively many units riding on him via DFS.
Let's move on to our best and final bets. First fight, Ricky Tercios against Cameron Smotherman. I like the Ghost of Decision here. I make that closer to minus 300. You can bet minus 200 out there currently. I also lean to Tercios here as well, but I think you may find a better number live after round one. Smotherman, the striker. Tercios could potentially mix in some volume grappling. But Smotherman, I believe 4 years younger, has a 2-inch reach advantage. I would expect him to get out to a lead and for Tercios to have to rally in the back half of the fight. Billy, that's how you're looking to play it as well. You like Smotherman pre-fight, and you're looking for a Tercios live angle, I assume, after round one, and then hoping to have an arbitrage opportunity here. Is that correct?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, if it comes before the end of round one, great. Like at any point, if the plus in front of Tercios's number gets beyond the 190 that I bet Smotherman at, I'm going for it. It's an interesting fight. I actually published this one earlier in the week. It's been up since I want to say Wednesday. Tercios is the more skilled fighter in pretty much every way. He's just not a good athlete. Like he's just kind of a dude. He has one of the best UFC bios. He lists one of his pre-UFC greatest accomplishments is winning a Super Smash Brothers tournament in 2008, which I really enjoyed. But he's just kind of like a goofy nerd who's been training MMA or been training various martial arts his whole life. Where Smotherman has only been training, I think, like 5 or 6 years, something like that. Maybe said 2019, but way more gifted, a little bit more size and strength. And we often see with those guys that size and strength, it tires you out trying to use it, and he fades down the stretch. Where Tercios, he'll keep coming at you because he's not that explosive. He doesn't, smaller muscles don't burn as much oxygen. You can keep him going. I I would be very shocked if Smotherman doesn't make this line get big enough through his first round win. Either, I mean, he might just finish him in the first round, but if he doesn't, I really think we'll get a much better price on Tercios and therefore be able to lock in a profit. So anytime you can lock in a profit, no matter who wins, I'd consider that a best bet. Although this is really more of a final bet because it's a little bit complicated making all those things happen.
Two of my bigger projected edges on the card, but still more final bets for me. I don't have the as much conviction in my head as I do apparently on paper between Michael Johnson and Alexander Hernandez here. Now, I do show value both on Hernandez and the under or the ends inside the distance prop. Hernandez, I make about minus 175. You can bet him at minus 135. The inside the distance prop, I make about minus 140. You can take minus 106. So pretty substantial edges on both of those wagers. Hernandez is 6 years younger. Johnson, an inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage, but he is, I believe, 41 years old now. Is getting very late in his career. Has won 4 or 5. Hernandez on a 4-fight winning streak of his own. Johnson actually the more efficient striking numbers, outlanding opponents by 1.3 strikes per minute. Hernandez getting outlanded by 0.3 strikes per minute. But Hernandez does have the grappling upside in this matchup. 61% control rate throughout his career, just 32% for Johnson. Johnson does have good takedown defense, north of 80% for his career, but Hernandez doubles him up in terms of takedown volume. I do think he's going to land takedowns here, if not finish Johnson in an early striking exchange. Johnson, though, definitely finish. Hernandez coming back the other way, still has very fast hands, very lethal combinations. So the under fight ends inside the distance, and then Hernandez on the money line between Alexander Hernandez and Michael Johnson. Billy, any bets or thoughts for you on this fight?
Yeah, I'm leaning Johnson here simply because these are both guys who feel like they could both win or lose to almost anyone in the roster, if that makes sense. Like I just don't want to lay juice on either of them kind of ever. To correct you slightly, Michael Johnson, I would have got this so wrong. Somehow still 39 years old. He's been in the UFC since like 1996 and he's only 39 years old. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, I made up that first part. He hasn't been there quite that long, but it feels like it. So, yeah, still not quite 40. Somehow seems just as fast and athletic in his last couple of fights as he ever did. There's another one we've got from John LaFranca. He did the full preview on this one. He pointed out, which I thought was really interesting, that anytime Alexander Hernandez has fought like what we would consider an above average striker for the division, he's lost. And then guys who try to grapple him is when Hernandez can defensively grapple and then win with the striking. So we'll see if that dynamic continues here. Always scary betting on a guy, even though he's not quite 40 yet, of Johnson's age. So I don't have a strong conviction either way.
That'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content from both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. If you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed today's show, look for the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. We'll see you back here for UFC 325 next week.